program is fairly diverse. We're kind of moving away from one scientist that just works with potatoes, one works with grains. We're kind of looking at a systems approach here now. So three main parts of what we do research on. Cropping systems is probably the biggest part of it. We're also looking at these bio-based products, so they're essentially pesticides or fertilizers that are derived from extracts from plants and bacteria. It's a bit of snake oil sales, it could be, but there is some hardcore science behind that, so we're trying to keep some of that stuff out. We're also working with novel crops, and these aren't really things that are going to save PEI agriculture by putting it in the cropping system, but these are locally produced, locally consumed, high-value crops that we need some regional data on. Okay, so I spoke here, just going to move this around, a couple years ago, and I had this slide up, and I'm just going to kind of put it in as part of the motherhood statements for cropping systems that we should all keep in mind when we're designing our rotations. So one of the big things is yields have to increase or remain constant with reduced inputs. If yields are staying the same and we're hammering with the fertilizer, then there's a problem with the rotation. Crops other than the main crop need to become profitable, so more money making crops, more money in the rotation, and reduce variability of income and increase economic risk for producers. So these are all things that we kind of got to keep in the back of our mind when we're designing these rotations. Do these all come together in a perfect world? Never, usually not. But these are things that we have to, basic principles that we have to follow. Getting into some more, reasons why we rotate our crops. Weeds, it's an obvious thing. Diseases, we were just in Truro last week. Corn diseases are on the rise there. Fungicide application in corn is kind of difficult. Growing corn 2 out of 5 years or 3 out of 6 years probably doesn't help things either. So insects, we're looking at a wireworm management strategy with potatoes. Wireworm is not just a potato problem. We're seeing it in other crops too. So, weeds, diseases, insects, these are all the reasons why we have a diverse cropping system. We're looking at conserving nutrients. Carbon's going to be a big one. Phosphorus is probably the single biggest nutrient of concern for the next 50 years. We're probably going to see peak phosphorus. We need to start now figuring out how to manage it a little bit better in the fields. Soil organic matter and PEI, we've got light fluffy soils. We tend to till quite a bit. Building organic matter is the single biggest factor that you can do to improve nutrient cycling, water holding capacity, etc. Okay, so this experiment here, this wasn't my experiment. It was kind of a case of an experiment that had too many daddies. It was started out by Jerry Ivany and then taken over by Rick Peters. I don't know a whole lot of the details about this, but there are some of the things that came out in the numbers. I was going through the data. Some of the things to kind of get us thinking about, designing effective cropping systems. So these are all 4-year rotations. Okay, we've got our conventional potato right here. This is the organic equivalent of the conventional potato. So this is a big thing. It's not really, organic, you need a 4-year rotation minimum, right? So in order to compare this with everything else, we had to add an extra year of red clover to keep everything the same. The blue tends to be your cash crops in this, and the red are your so-called biofumigants.
Attention, please. The conference is about to begin in conference room A, B, and C. Attention, please. The conference is about to begin. Thank you.
Okay, you're back on? Okay. Okay, so this is these are the biofumigants, and some of these plants, they've been reported to produce certain compounds that, essentially fumigate the soil. That's the case with most of these. Pearl millet is a little bit different. It's more of a non-host, so it doesn't really produce compounds. It's actually nematodes just don't like it. So if that's in the rotation, then you tend to see a drop in nematode populations. Okay, so we're going through these very quickly. And this is the reason why we don't include conventional rotations in an organic cropping systems experiment. This is no big surprise. Conventional potato is always going to out-yield organic potato. Okay, we're looking at the small grains. Again, this is relatively respectable yield, certainly from an organic standpoint. A little bit low for small plot research. Now, there was an economist who worked on this project, and he basically assumed that the crop value for organic was double that of conventional. That's not my idea, that's his idea. That's not really the point of this slide. The point is, there's actually 3 money-making crops in this rotation, and there's a significantly higher economic return at the end of the 4 years. Okay, so here we have all the rotations, and we're going to go through this kind of quickly too. Some very interesting things came out of this looking at these data here. So we have, this is called a unimodal response, where you get like the curve going like this. That was the same through every single rotation. These are the mean values over here. Really interesting that the conventional rotation actually had the highest level of spring organic matter. And I guess when you go down to the second highest, the organic rotations with the highest spring organic matter were ones that had a healthy dose of red clover and a mix of the biofumigants, or pretty much all biofumigants. Okay, we're looking at fall organic matter here. It's a little bit of a better measurement than spring organic matter, and it's definitely like we don't see that curve, we're just seeing a linear response. Again, we've got the highest fall organic matter was actually in the conventional rotation. So this, we call it the classic PEI rotation, potatoes underseeded with cereals and clover. You add another year of clover in there, and you're building organic matter over 4 years. So the interesting thing about this is the highest soil organic matter, the black one, is increasing. That's conventional. The second highest is this green one here, which is number 2. But it's not really building organic matter. So take what you will from that. Another interesting thing that came out of the numbers, as you know, the organic producers are kind of limited with the products they can use to control fungus in the field. This just shows the copper accumulation in the soil through the 4 years in every single organic rotation. These levels still aren't really super high, but there's definitely a trend towards higher accumulation. When you're relying on synthetic fungicides, you're not going to see those copper levels. It's obvious. Okay, so take home from that study at this point, conventional potato out-yields organic. That's not a big surprise. Organic nets more money. If you get double value, then it's probably more money. That's a little bit artificial. That's how the economists dealt with those numbers. More money makers in the rotation equals more money. And overall, we didn't present a lot of the actual numbers, but there's definitely a trend towards increased clover in the rotation. You're going to see increased organic matter through time. Okay, so this is, I guess, some of the more risky stuff that we're doing at Harrington right now. I designed this experiment with Dune Poly. We're looking at organic matter levels going down with the increased amount of soybeans being produced in the potato rotation. Intercropping is kind of a novel idea in other places. It's not so novel here. A lot of guys do it. So, what would happen if we tried to interseed soybeans with some of these other crops? This is the sort of thing. This is high risk. We didn't really know what we were getting into. Fortunately, we have some fairly open-minded technical staff and farm crew who are on board for this sort of thing. So basically, the overall design, we're looking at underseeding fall rye or white clover or red clover into soybean or canola. And we included I guess, okay, so the two sides of this were seeding at the same time that we seeded the main crop, and then we looked at overseeding, so later in the season at soybean leaf drop, to see if we could establish a crop going into the fall. We also included the spray, no spray treatment, and that was to see if, especially with the legumes, if we were to hit it with a herbicide, would there be a flush of nutrients to the main crop and kind of give it a little bit of a boost. And those are the herbicides that we used. We were growing IP beans, the DH420, and I think it was L130 was the Liberty Link that we're growing. Okay, and then the idea after that was to follow with potato, and each plot was split fertility, no fertility, so that we'd see actually what the carryover effects were from the other crops. This is the design. It's not really that important. This is what it looked like in the field, so we used a Brilliant seeder to seed one way, and then seed the main crop going that way. This is later on, you can see the spray band back there, and this is as the main crop is becoming established. This is why you don't underseed fall rye on soybeans. This is pretty much a scorched earth effect. Again, this is high-risk stuff. This is why we're doing it. There's the spray a little bit better, but yeah, not recommended. And this is why John McLeod told me not to underseed soybeans with clover. Now, surprisingly, there's going to be a yield penalty with when you're underseeding anything. It was surprisingly not that bad, even in these plots. Okay, there was definitely yield drag from underseeding at the time of planting, but it wasn't that bad with the red clover. It was worse with white clover, and it was terrible with fall seeded rye, or spring seeded fall rye. We're just going through a lot of this information now. We think that it can work. We've got a proposal in to look at 5 different crops, 4 different seeding dates, and 4 different rates. The rate was way too high on this. I mean, it's clear. I mean, that's a forage crop, right? We still got the beans off them. This is kind of what it looks like underneath the canola. One of the interesting things was even in the spray bands where we're applying Liberty Link, which is a fairly hardcore chemical, we still saw quite a bit of the clover survived the spring and came through in the fall. Okay, so at this point we have a mountain of data. We're going through it now. Definitely yield variability. There is room for looking at different rates, different dates. Underseeding definitely has potential for canola, and overseeding definitely has potential for soybean. Probably not at planting the main crop. One of the most interesting things that we found so far was that when we did plant the underseeded crop in the soybean, the lower pod, the money pod, was significantly higher in the underseeded crop. So, the idea is that, it's going to lead to staining and you won't be able to get that lower bean off. The plant actually compensates with the competition and raises that lower pod. So, if we had shorter species, lower seeding rate, there's definitely potential there. Okay, so that was the high-risk stuff that we're working on at Harrington. That's, a couple of things that we're working on. This was one of the more interesting projects that I've been able to work on over the past few years. And basically what we did, we measured 35 fields in 2011, 17 fields in 2012. We went into those fields and took a sample at canola flowering. Looked at the roots before harvest and after harvest to look for sclerotinia, and just basically did a data blitz to collect as much information as we possibly could from the soil, and then looked at nematode community, the number of cysts, and right now we're looking at the amount of fungus and bacteria that are actually in the soil, including mycorrhizae. So we subjected all these data to fairly high-level multivariate statistical analysis. They put everything into a data cloud, and you look for these trends. And we can criticize the the high-risk stuff that we're doing at Harrington, but these data are actually, these are your data. Okay, there's people here who are in this study. This is farmer information, right? This is Ronnie Matters. I don't know if he's in the room here, but we'll use him as a scale. There he is. Everybody probably knows Ronnie or knows of him. This is an idea of the variability going through the province. Okay. A fairly healthy stand of. Okay, so this is what Peter Scott calls a spider web, and this is a very powerful analysis. What we did, we asked the growers what the previous crop was, and then we put that into the analysis and then looked for trends in our data cloud, right? So this is the spider web. It's a little bit difficult to understand. I actually kind of made it into a nice, easy to understand diagram here. So it's not really, the main things to keep in mind here, you have your y-axis and you have your x-axis, and then the position of these things here. So the closer that these things are to these axes, the more relationship there is between them. So the more things we measure, you get variability over here and variability over here, then these techniques actually pick up, it's called covariability, right? So that's how we figure out what some of these trends are. So if we look on this, it's basically a Cartesian plane, and we've got 4 quadrants, right? So here on the x-axis we have high pH and low organic matter. So that's what this is, high pH, low organic matter. This is low pH, low organic matter. This is high organic matter, low pH, and high pH, high organic matter. We don't really have any carryover effects there. So this is really interesting information that came out of fields right across PEI. How is this useful? If you're designing a rotation and you might want to build organic matter, then you might look at some of these crops. If high pH is not your thing, then you might not want to have soybean. These are all different tools that you can use when you're planning your rotation. I think a copy of this presentation is in here. Okay, so another thing we're working on, organic rotation, we're calling it 2.0. If all you're measuring is, some soil nutrients and yield, you're actually not going to find out a lot of information about how management decisions affect, those things. So we're going in, we have a bit of industry support on this. The organic people, they don't have the luxury of just putting a different product in the tank when the problem comes up, so they tend to be a little bit more open-minded to some management techniques. That's where we can, get a little bit crazy with some of the things, and if conventional growers can take anything from that, that's the whole point of conducting this research. Okay, this is in your book, you can check it out. We're tracking phosphorus. Phosphorus is a huge deal in organic systems. It tends to drop off a lot quicker than it does in conventional farms. We're taking a whole systems approach. My colleague Judith Niranienza is the nutrient management specialist. We're working together, and Vernon Rod is actually the PI on this. So we've got 4 years. I should go back to the rotations. These rotations are actually suited to our NGO and industry sponsors. So these are what you would expect, within the confines of organic agriculture, organic dairy rotations, PEI grain elevators. These are mainly grains and oilseeds. Red Soil Organics is carrot-based rotations, and the organic producers, they have some vegetable crops and edible beans and stuff like that. So fairly similar color schemes. We were hoping to get 2 money-making crops in every rotation. Again, we're including these biofumigants. This is going to be part of the landscape we're thinking for the next little while for sure, so we really have to generate some local data on that. Okay, and ECODA. We started this last year. It's looking like we're probably going to hit the reset button and start it again. So much has changed over the past year. The wireworm is coming in big time, so we really want to incorporate that into some of this experiment. The main focus on this is the interaction between oilseeds and potatoes. So pretty much every rotation is going to have potatoes and oilseeds in it, different conformations. McCain is on board on this, and they have a site on their research farm in Thornceville. Okay, and again, tracking phosphorus and sulfur through time. Nematodes, it's a huge deal. We're going to be tracking those. We usually sample in the spring, mid-season, and then post-harvest. And we're trying to incorporate this bacterial and fungal biomass in the soil for every soil sample that we take. So we're looking at the nutrients, but also the nature of the organic matter. Okay. All right. So this is a project that's actually been proposed, and this is largely due to the checkoffs with the grain growers. This is literally going to be a game changer for the industry. So when you go look in the States, the extension people, they can do a lot of on-farm research. That's not really our mandate for Agriculture Canada. The ability to access funds that are right from the growers. Growers can determine what the research priorities are. We can use those dollars to leverage more dollars from other programs and actually do more on-farm research. This is a really big deal. This is definitely going to change things. I'm involved with a couple of the small parts. It's a massive project that's been proposed. I'm involved with a few smaller things. One of them is to dive into all of the data that we have to date for the East Coast. This is basically everything that's been published, all of the regional variety trials, any of the experimental data that we have from Harrington. Put a math and stats graduate student in a room, lock the door, open it up 2 years later, and see what the trends are. The difference with some of this is we're going to try and, there's a weather station network through the whole Maritimes. We're going to try and base everything on agroclimatological data. So there's planned experiments for Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and PEI. We're going to keep those close to these weather stations so we can track weather patterns and try to figure out how management and weather interact to give you results on that. So I guess bottom line, check off, it's going to be a huge deal for on-farm research and extension. Okay, that's it. Any questions or comments?
Well, thank you very much there, Aaron.